Easy answers there. So hey, give Jason Bay a big hand there, please.
Hey, you guys, thanks for having me out here. I appreciate it. It's always fun to come out and talk to students because you guys have tons of awesome questions. And I have a lot of experience in the game industry. I've been making games and interactive software for about 20 years. I've worked at a bunch of different companies and done a bunch of different jobs. So I know that some of the speakers that you will be seeing at these events will be talking to you about like programming or art and different topics like that. I would like to talk with you about things around the process of like getting your first job in games, about networking, about applying, finding jobs, building your resume, doing the interviews and all that stuff. That's pretty, like, it usually freaks people out. It's pretty scary stuff, especially if it's your first like professional job. So I find that those are mostly what I can help people out with. So what I've got lined up for you is I'll give you a quick kind of my background just so you can understand where I'm coming from, and maybe that'll help you understand what you can talk to me about. And then I've got some, I just want to talk to you a little bit about how hiring managers in the game industry think and how they work, because I think that's really important for you to understand like how to present yourself and give you some insight into the process, especially some of the weird parts of the process that are confusing and kind of freak people out. And then, but really, most of the time, I think I would just like to do a Q&A. So like if you guys have, if you have questions about any part of that process, like from where you are now to when your butt is in the seat, like at a game studio or a movie studio, I'm mostly from games, but they're pretty similar in a lot of ways. Then start thinking about what those questions are now, so that we can do that in the Q&A afterwards. So to start out, I started my career. One second, I'm already thirsty. I started my career in the mid-'90s making some software with some friends. So we started a little software company called Virtual Seattle, and it was it started off as a screensaver, and we ended up turning it into an interactive map, kind of an interactive experience. And so we 3D modeled, like, and this was in the 90s when most people weren't doing a lot of 3D modeling work. We 3D modeled like a ton of downtown Seattle, all the tourist areas. And we made this like interactive pre-rendered thing because you couldn't do real-time 3D really on most machines at the time. Anyway, so we sold it in gift stores and little computer stores, and we had that business for like several years. And then when we closed that down, I got my first job at a game studio, and I started off as a tester in the QA group. And then from there, I moved into game design, started doing programming design tools, and then became a programmer, lead programmer. Eventually moved into management and became the technical director of a studio, and then was the studio head for a while of a mobile game studio that had a bunch of different teams. So from there, I started shifting into product management, which is quite a different role, but it's still kind of like a management product role. And that's what I do at Amazon now. Is I work in the Lumberyard team, which is in their game services group, and I am working on a new product within Lumberyard that's not announced yet, so I can't talk about it. But it's pretty awesome. You're gonna love it. Wink, wink. So anyway, so that's kind of my background. And James mentioned that I run a website on the side. It's just something that I started a few years ago. It's called Game Industry Career Guide. And the reason I started it is because for years I've been doing talks like this one to people like you, over at DigiPen and like the UW, and just so many questions. Like you guys have so many questions about these things that I think most people in the industry kind of take for granted because they've sort of been through it all, and it seems kind of rote, and it's not things that we would think people even were freaked out about or had questions about. But I kept hearing these same questions over and over and over again, and so I wanted to write them down so people could just find them on the web. And it turns out that got really popular, and so something like 40,000 people visit my website every month because I just got a lot of content up there. So if you guys haven't found that yet, you should check it out. Just bound to be something for every one of you that's in this room that would be helpful. I did a little podcast for a while if you're into audio, and I've written a couple of books. One is for people that want to get into the testing industry, the game testing. And then this new one that I just released in July is a lot of the content from my website plus a bunch more, and it's structured in a way that's kind of easy to find by topic. So that's me in a nutshell. I've prepared a few things. to make sure I don't ramble. I'll just ramble if I don't have some notes here. All right, so this before the Q&A, there's just a few things I want to talk to you about. One of them, the main thing is I want to help you guys get inside the head of a hiring manager in the game industry. As I said, it'll really help you, when you understand where they're coming from, it'll really help you present yourself in the right way. So first of all, are you guys familiar with that term hiring manager? Yeah? Okay, cool. All right. A lot of people are like, what's a hiring manager? Right. So it's just, so if you're doing art, the hiring manager in a game studio is often the art director. If you're doing engineering, there's like often an engineering director or programming director. Sometimes if the studio is a little smaller, the hiring manager would be like the studio head. So it's the person that's inside that's going to be interviewing you and making the hiring decision. So the first thing I want to talk to you about when it comes to interviewing is a lot of people think of the interview as sort of like a test, where like there's these arbitrary invisible rules, and you're just hoping that you can like answer the questions right and like pass and get in, right? And that's understandable because for your entire lives you've been going to school, and school is very much like learn this subject area, take this test, pass or don't pass. And then you've been doing that for like 15 years, right? Or longer maybe. And so it's understandable that you might apply that to how the interview process works. But what I want to drive home today is that the interview process isn't like a test, it's about finding the right fit. So that's hard to believe for a lot of people because they're like, well, but if I'm a programmer, they're going to ask me programming questions, and if I don't pass them, I'm not going to get hired, right? There's a little bit of that, like they're trying to suss out your technical competence, which is why you're here. You're learning your technical competence and building your technical skills, or your art skills, or whatever it is, right? But when you go in for your interview, they've got a specific job that they want you to do, and they're just trying to find out whether you seem to be able to do that job. So they're not trying to find out like, oh, we're going to interview 20 people and hire like the best artist or the best engineer, right? They're trying to find an engineer or an artist or whatever that is the right fit for what they're trying to get accomplished. The second point that dovetails from that is that they also want to see proof, right? And so that's part of what the interview is. They're trying to dig, and they're trying to find proof that you are the right fit. And so that looks like there's a bunch of different things that go into that, right? So your portfolio, your art portfolio or your engineering portfolio or your design portfolio or whatever it is, that helps with that proof, right? They're trying to look at what you've done and then use that data to extrapolate whether they think you can do the thing that they need to do. So again, it's about fit. It's not about a test, right? Like you could be an incredible anime artist, right? You could be one of the top anime artists in the world. You're still not going to get hired to make Call of Duty because it's not the right fit. So if you went in and you interviewed, and you'd get the email, it's like, sorry, we decided to pursue other candidates. And I think, damn, I failed the interview. You didn't fail the interview, you just weren't the right fit. And you don't want to work there anyway. If you're in anime, you don't want to work at Call of Duty, right? So the fit is as much for you as it is for them, okay? So it's a mutual thing. You want to make sure that what you want out of life and what your skill set is matches what they want you to do at the company. Also, for proof, are some of the little tests, questions that they'll give, right? It's hard, I guess there are places that do art tests. Generally, the scary ones are the engineering tests, though. Some places do like kind of trick questions, and plus you're doing it often on a whiteboard, which, I think that's bullshit personally, because like who codes on a whiteboard? Like nobody does, right? You don't have IntelliSense, you can't delete, you can't copy and paste stuff around. So I don't know, people still do it. So you'll want to practice that for sure. But that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get at like, do they have the right skill set to work here? Let's see, what else do I want to talk about along those lines? Yeah, so that's 2 points. It's not a test. They're looking for fit. They want proof, right? And they're not looking for potential necessarily, because potential is dangerous. Like they can look at what you've done. They're like, yeah, this person's never done exactly what we need, but they have potential. That's generally scary for hiring managers because there's no proof, right? You have to do that a little bit, especially with people that are just coming out of school because you haven't shipped a bunch of games. But that's why you do projects in school, is because you're building up that proof that can show them what you can do and how and why. The last point, and this is an important point, really important, is that in the game industry as a whole, in general, hiring managers are super busy and they are disorganized and they've already got this massive workload, this massive project workload that they're working on. Like they're building a game. And hiring is often like extra, like, oh my God, there's this extra stuff that we have to do. Hiring is hard. It's really hard, like finding people and interviewing them and trying to vet whether they're the right fit, because the risk is very high there. If you hire the wrong person, it's a disaster for you and for them, right? If I hire somebody and I move them and potentially their family like across the country to work at my studio, and then 3 months in we realize this is not the right fit, they can't do the work that we need them to do, that's really painful for everybody. And that's my failure as a hiring manager, right? That's not that person's failure to perform. That was a bad hire because it was a bad fit. Like the hiring manager made the wrong choice there, right? They didn't vet fit effectively. But so it's a big risk, like to get it wrong. So because of all that, hiring managers are just kind of like stressed out and kind of freaked out about the interview process. So if you're looking at a bigger company like Microsoft or Nintendo, some of the places, they'll have an organization that's dedicated to recruiting. And so they're going to be a lot more buttoned down. Like when you apply, you're going to get a response faster. You're going to have a dedicated recruiter potentially. So those ones, it's a little more normal. It's a little more what you would kind of expect of a company. But mid-sized studios and small studios, oftentimes they don't have dedicated people at all. So you may apply and never hear back. And that might be because their email box is too full and they're disorganized and they're not good at following up. Or they might see it there and they might be like, I got to dig into this person and look at their portfolio. That's going to take me 2 hours. I'll do it tomorrow, right? And then that goes on day after day after day. There's another way it should be, right? It shouldn't be like that. They should be prioritizing because like the most important thing you can do for your game studio is hire the right people, right? But I'm just talking to you about reality. This is the way it is in a lot of smaller studios. And so if you guys can understand that, you can use that information. So for one thing, if you don't hear back from them, you can follow up. And you don't have to feel weird about following up, like, oh, do they think I'm bugging them? They might not have actually seen it. Or if you go in and you go in for the interview and they're kind of disorganized and they've got like 4 people interviewing you and they're asking kind of weird questions. They're like, where would you hide an elephant? Like people actually ask those questions, and it's because there's people on the teams that are they're not trained in how to do an interview. And so they're like, I got to interview this artist in 10 minutes. Google, like, what are some questions I should ask? And then there's all these really stupid questions that come up in Google, right? And they're like, where to hide an elephant? That'll test their creative thinking ability. But then when they give an answer, you're like, they don't even know, how do you even evaluate that? So I don't know. They're like, I wouldn't hide it. Elephants are awesome. I mean, is that a good answer or a bad answer? I don't know. So you will run into situations like that, and you have to understand that like it's not like everybody at that table that's interviewing you knows exactly what they're asking, and there's these hidden answers, and like they've got it together, and you're kind of like the one that doesn't really know what's going on. I mean, oftentimes a lot of people like at the table kind of don't know what's going on. All right. So is that surprising for anybody to hear? Okay. So some people are like, that's totally so maybe those are the people that have been to some of those interviews. But yeah, so those are kind of the 3 main points I want to get through to you guys today. It's not a test; you're looking for fit, so help them understand fit, and that could look like customizing your portfolio. Like if you've done a bunch of different art styles, for instance, or you've done a bunch of different design work, if you're interviewing at a place that has a particular they only do the 2 games and they do them every year, and it's a certain art style, like make a custom portfolio for them and send it to them. And if they ask, or maybe, at the end of the portfolio, you can say, oh, here's some other stuff I've done in different styles. But, make it easy for them. Spoon feed them the fact that you're the right fit for them, right? And as you go through that exercise, you might even find for yourself that you're not the right fit for them. And, if that's the case, I wouldn't say don't apply necessarily, but, if you're doing something that's not what they do, just understand that, you might not be the right fit, and it's, not a great chance of maybe getting hired there. Maybe you don't want to work there, right? Second thing is they want proof, not potential, so show them the proof. And then they're busy and disorganized oftentimes, so drive that. You might need to drive that process, right? Try it. If you get an email from an HR person and you haven't heard back from anybody else, use that a contact. Like talk to the HR person. Hey, I haven't heard back from anybody. Like, what are some next steps? How can I move this forward? Like, don't be afraid to do that. So I think that's mostly it. Yeah, those are kind of the main points. I guess from there, I already saw some hands go up. So like, let's do some Q&A. Yeah.
I heard that hiring managers, when they're going through artists' portfolios, if they can't see your best, or they can't see your best artwork right when they open the page, they trash your application. Is that true?
Well, it's a generalization. Everybody's different. Some art managers are gonna like be really diligent and dig through. Some are like super busy and they're like, I got 50 of these to do today. This is the last thing I want to be doing at 9 o'clock at night, and they're gonna burn through it, right? So that probably is the case sometimes. So that's where like this idea of like driving it and spoon feeding it and like putting the things that they need to know to evaluate fit up front is the best way to go. So I would say put your best stuff up front. I would say even if you have crappy stuff, just don't put it in your portfolio, so they don't see that accidentally. And not just your best stuff, but the stuff that you think will be the best fit for the places you're applying for. Yeah. So. Yeah.
So I've always been told when you go into an interview, dress for the job. And most of the time that's like going in a suit and ties. Here I am at my desk. What is it like for the game industry to go into an interview? And then I have a second question as well.
Okay. All right. So question number one is, how do I dress for a job interview? Do I wear a suit and tie? One of the game studios I was at, like in the early 2000s, a guy came in wearing a tie, and the person that met him at the door was like, "Take off your tie." Like, take it off. People at game studios don't wear ties generally. Sometimes they will, just to be funny. But yeah, so the general rule of thumb is that you want to dress like, I don't know, like not even business casual, but like I might go into an interview like pretty much just like I am now, like a button-down shirt, some nice jeans, decent shoes, make sure you get a haircut first. Like you want to look good, but the game industry is pretty cash, so there's not a lot of people like dressing up a lot. Even executives at game in game studios don't really dress up too high. So as a rule of thumb, I'd say, what I just said, like a dress shirt, nice jeans or like a skirt if you're a skirt person, and make sure that they're not wrinkled. Also, you can usually ask, like if you're going to have a contact there, like it's going to be a recruiter or an HR person, you can literally just ask them, like, hey, how should I dress for my interview? How do people dress there? And they'll tell you. They generally won't volunteer that information because they just don't think about it. I think it's one of those things that people don't, people in the industry don't realize that people are worried about that. They're like, well, just dress however you want. Well, that's not really true, right? You're trying to put your best foot forward. So talk to the HR person or whoever you have as a contact and ask them how to dress, and they'll give you some guidance on that. Yeah, sure. Saw something over here. Are we going to number two? Okay, we'll come back to number two. Yeah.
What's the best practice for presenting your portfolio?
Yeah, I've just seen so many different ways to present it. I would say just rules of thumb are put your strongest stuff in. Make it really. I think most of the time the portfolio is going to be. We're talking about online portfolio, right? Yeah. So generally talking about an online portfolio. If you've done a bunch of fine artwork that you want to bring to the interview, that's cool. I've seen people do that, and that's kind of nice to let them know that you're well-rounded and you don't just do digital. But as far as when you're seeing in your application, they're going to be looking at your online portfolio. So really, the most important thing is presenting your best stuff and having good UX for the portfolio. So I've definitely seen portfolios. I'm not an art director, by the way, but I've seen a ton of art portfolios that are like, they're kind of hard to navigate. It's like they might be overly categorized, and you're like, I don't know which one of these to look at first. Or they might you click and it expands, but then there's no way to close it. And you're like, click, 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 and then you escape. Oh, okay, I guess escape it closes it. So just make sure it's easy to navigate. And you can kind of test that. Most of you, I would imagine, would probably be using one of the mini online portfolio sites. So they probably are going to have decent UX built in. But a lot of them let you customize it. So don't feel like you have to get super fancy. Like keep it simple and keep it really streamlined. And if once you have it set up, like test it with some friends or something. Like say, hey, here's my portfolio. Let me watch you look through it and just see where they go and what they do and if they get stuck on anything. That's the main thing. You just want to make it easy and accessible and fast. Yeah.
So if somebody really isn't that good at interviewing, they don't know what questions to ask, and there's just like a moment of like painful silence, what are some good ways to kind of break the ice and initiate a conversation?
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, if the person interviewing you is a bad interviewer and there's an awkward silence, what do you do? How do you drive that? I would walk in to the interview with a handful of questions prepared in your head about the specific job, maybe about the product, maybe about the company, and then you can ask one of those questions, right? You can kind of interview them a little bit, and there's a lot of good reasons for that. I would probably recommend doing that anyway, like even if you don't get into the awkward silence situation. Because remember, you're trying to assess fit as well, so it's in your best interest to also make sure that you're the right fit for this team and for this company that you're interviewing for. So you could ask them about what's the coolest project that you're working on right now, like sort of like open-ended kind of softball questions that they'd be interested in talking about, and then you can kind of go from there based on what they say, kind of follow your interest. And also, if you ask things that are relevant, like if you say, hey, I noticed you guys launched this one product 2 years ago, and it didn't really grow, but you guys are still running it, like, how is that going? Is there like a niche audience that's playing that game? You might be able to actually get some good insights into the company. And it also is telegraphing to the interviewers that you pay attention to what they're doing. And so it's a good idea to go and research the company before you do the interview as well. Find out like what products they've had out over the last few years, try to figure out how they did, and those are some things that you can bring up and talk about. Yeah.
So, coming from a game programmer, what do you what is something good that you can showcase inside of the portfolio? Like I assume screenshot is like, look how good the artist did, but how do you like say the
Right.
programming was really good
Right.
too?
Look at how well commented this code is in this GIF of my code. Right. Yeah, it's programming isn't generally as visible, right? So, but you can make it visible. So, some of the things that I've seen that have always impressed me over the years are little demos. So, if you're interviewing for like an AI programmer position, you can make some kind of a little demo that has visual output. Like if you're, in school you might do things like here's a maze, write an A star that gets through it or something like that. Just try to give some visual output. Try to draw something simple, right? It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be super colorful and nice. But anything that can visually illustrate your algorithms in action is pretty good, right? The graphics programmers have it easy because they can do all sorts of like cool shader, psychedelic fractal things, right? And those are fun to look at. Once a manager is very interested in you, like they'll usually dig a little more. Like if you've got some stuff in a GitHub repo or you have something else that you've done like that that's accessible to the public, they'll go and kind of dig around in that and kind of try to check that out. So if you do have something like that, like if you guys have stuff in public repos, give them links, in your application, and then make sure it's commented so they can see what area they should check out. But yeah, little like and if you can do it in browser, that's the best. Like little in browser things, because again, you're just kind of trying to make it as easy as possible for them to look at it. If you can give them a binary to download, but then like what if they're on a Mac and you only have a Windows binary or something, So plus it's just extra steps to like download it and maybe run an installer. So if you can get it running in the browser, that's the best. Barring that, you can take screenshots. Your portfolio can say like, here's a thing I made. Here are the screenshots. Here's some code examples, or click here to go look at the repo. Yeah.
So, if you kind of do everything or modeling wise, and you want to, you mentioned custom portfolios like for a company. If you're going for something specific like environment, like that can be a lot of different things. Would you make a custom portfolio of all the environments that you've done, or like more catered towards something like would you do like natural environments and industrial environments? If they're just looking for industrial, or would like for characters, would you do like cartoony and realistic, or if they're just looking for realistic, like you might not put environments in the character portfolio, but like
Right.
like
Yeah, so if you're building a portfolio, you're trying to kind of customize it to a company, should you just put the things you think that companies want, or should you put other stuff as well? I think there's a bunch of ways to approach that. It's a heuristic, right? You're trying to show them the things that they're the most interested in first. So you could even have like a handful, like you could have, here's my realistic stuff, here's my stylized stuff, but give them the link to the realistic stuff, so they see that first. If that's possible, the way you've got it set up, that would be a good way to do it, I think. Yeah. You don't have to hide your other work. The goal is not to hide your other work. It's just to like make sure that they can easily get to the work that they're the most interested in seeing.
Like you said, give them the custom portfolio first, but then hey, this is my.
Yeah, sure. Yep, that would be great. Yeah.
So this is more of a programmer question, but it can also apply to artists. With your programming experience and your experience as a whole, how there are those times where you just sort of hit a wall and you get writer's block, or you're just sort of I don't really want to do this right now, and it's you're losing interest. How would you, or how have you overcome those blocks where you're just
right. Okay, so it's an engineering day-to-day tactical question. When you hit code writer's block, what do you do to get out of it? Well, I mean, most of the coding I've done has been in a company with other engineers around, and so one of the ways that I get through a block is I look at it from different perspectives. I try different things. Maybe Google around a little bit to see, if anything sparks, kind of gets me through it. And then when I'm just totally frustrated, I get up and I walk to the next cube and I'm like, do you have a minute? I got a problem with this. Well, never mind, I got it. Often that's what it is, right? Once you go and start presenting it to somebody else, oftentimes there's something that happens in your brain when you go back to a high enough level that you can explain it to somebody. That oftentimes is where you need to be to get past the roadblock. So that's a comical thing that happens all the time.
So it's like rubber ducking, but with a person?
Yeah, I've never heard that term. I'm assuming it's you pretend like you're talking to the rubber duck?
Yeah.
Right, gotcha. That's cool. Where's the bug, dog? Yeah, sure, yeah. I have a feeling it probably works better with a human just because there's more on the line. But if the duck's what you got, give it a shot. I've never tried that. I'm going to try it. I've got a stuffed bear. Maybe I'll try that. I don't know. But yeah, but I think that's a good way to do it. And also just time. Just leave and go do something different. Just get your mind off of it and just go watch a movie or talk to a friend or I don't know, just do something else that gets your brain totally out of the code. And when you come back to it, sometimes you'll see stuff. I've definitely done that where I've gotten super frustrated. It's 11 at night, and I'm super frustrated. I just leave, and in the morning I come in and I'm just oh, there it is. Yep. Yeah.
So is that something that when you're putting together your art portfolio, do they want to see very different styles? Do they want to see your style and basically the technical skill and assume you can change it, or do you invest in different styles?
Right. So the question is, do you need to have your art portfolio showing different styles? Do they want to see diversity? You really can't generalize that. You're going to talk to some very experienced art managers that say no, I want to see deep expertise in this one style because this is all they're going to be doing for the next 5 years on this AAA project. And you're going to talk to art, art managers who are well, we have 5 smaller teams, and some of them are this style, some of them are realistic. I want to see diversity, right? So sometimes it depends on the company. I would say follow your interests, and I do think that erring on the side of getting a little bit of breadth is good. But having a deep experience in one style or one type of engineering even. It's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, if you find a company that needs that thing, you're a shoe-in, right? They're oh my god, this person's been doing only this one style that we need for 10 years. That's awesome, hired. Whereas the other students are going to be I'm not seeing a lot of diversity. Let's move on. So sorry, there's not a clear answer for that. It varies. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So with the whiteboard for programmers, my neighbor told me about this before. He had gone in one time and done it in one line. I'm just wondering, are they looking more for condensed code or more visually appealing code?
Right. Are they looking for whiteboarding? Are they looking for condensed code or visually appealing code? That one's going to depend a little bit on just who's interviewing you. Some engineers are really they want cleverness. I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say that good engineers want something that's readable, maintainable. They don't want clever, right? Now, that doesn't mean they don't want optimized or performant, but you can ask about that, right? You can ask about that. So if they give you a challenge and you're going to the board, you can just ask them for more info. Like, what do you want from this? Are you looking for readability, maintainability? Are you looking for performance? Like, do you have performance characteristics you want this algorithm to hit? Like, you can have that conversation before you start coding it, and that'll help you set your expectations. Question over here?
Okay, so the questions have sort of been focused on like what to do when you're approaching a studio, what to do when you are approaching someone and you want to be hired. Over the summer, I was actually contacted by a studio who saw my portfolio online, and I was completely unprepared because I never experienced. I never thought like anyone would want to reach out to me, and I was able to handle the situation. But what would your advice be for someone who was not expecting to be reached out to, but they reached out to?
Right, good question. Okay, so she was reached out to by a recruiter or a hiring manager over the summer and wasn't ready for it.
Well, that and also I could tell they were desperate to hire, so I was like, oh.
Desperate. Sometimes it's just a time crunch. It's not necessarily a bad thing. You want to still dig in and get a sense of it. You might what you find might make you turn and run the other way, but I wouldn't say that a feel of desperation is necessarily like a total red flag. It might mean that if you got hired, you'd be in like crunch mode instantly, which sucks.
They actually
But,
look at my portfolio. They just saw I know how to use Maya, and they were like, "Well,
Yeah.
hire you," and I was like,
Yeah.
"Actually, I'm not a good fit."
okay, all right, that's good. Okay, good. So there's a type of recruiter that's and hiring managers do this too. Sometimes it's called sourcing. So it's like a lot of times there's just a flood of resumes coming in, and their job is to just like go through the resumes. But oftentimes it's like they go out and they try to find people. And so that's one of the reasons that LinkedIn is so popular. Like, we think about it as a way to connect with other people. The secret of LinkedIn, the reason it's successful, is because it's a tool for recruiters. And recruiters pay like ungodly amounts of money to have like full search capabilities and have applicant tracking and stuff, right? So they're using these tools to go out and try to find people. And so in your case, they may have put in a really boneheaded search like Maya and art and in Seattle. Right, and then like spamming everybody, like it's possible, And so I think that's great that you followed your instincts. You're like, this person didn't really seem. They seemed desperate. They didn't seem like they really looked very closely. I'd still go and maybe investigate the company, and if it looked interesting, kind of like check it out. But yeah, so that's sourcing. You will get that, and that's one of the reasons to be LinkedIn too, because a lot of managers don't necessarily have those recruiting. The premium recruiting memberships on LinkedIn, and so they can only contact people that are like second degree connections. So that's one reason to link in a lot is because then it kind of opens you up to more people that can contact you. But back to your specific question, which is how do you prepare for that? The answer is to prepare for it. Like that's the answer, So part of that is think through. Okay, if somebody found me, and it's almost always going to be on LinkedIn, because that's the main tool that's used in the industry. If somebody finds me on LinkedIn, can they investigate me? Right? So do you have good links to your portfolios? Are your portfolios good? Are they where you want them to be? If you have like a personal blog, do you have a link to your personal blog where you're talking about art or code or whatever you're geeking out on to show them like you're really interested in this topic? Let them get a sense for your personality. So like just imagine like, okay, if I landed on my LinkedIn page, what would I be able to tell about me? And if you can't tell much, then think about how you can add that in there. And so LinkedIn over the last few years has tried to make it easier to like embed videos and embed slide shares and stuff, which are not a great way to present yourself. But you can do videos and you can do images of your work, things like that. You can put links to your public repos if you're an engineer, if you have some. Stuff like that. So that's a way to make it easy for them to check you out before so they can see if you're not a fit and not spam you if you're not a fit, right? But you're still going to get recruiters that do that. Like you guys will get spammed by recruiters and they're just super annoying, and they might even try to talk in a way that makes it seem like hey, I was just checking out your work and I think it's really great. I love it how you did that thing before. It was awesome. And you're like, oh, they looked at my stuff. And then you read between the lines, you're like, they didn't really say anything specific about anything I did. So they're just spamming, and then you can like choose to ignore them or whatever. But yeah.
Do recruiters and hiring managers look through YouTube for, say, I have a YouTube channel that I put out Unity tutorials
cool.
about doing, very small things like turn off the light.
Mm-hmm.
Do they look through that
Yeah, so the question is, if you have like a YouTube channel where you're doing little tutorials, for example, Unity tutorials, do hiring managers look at that? They do. I'm not sure I've talked to anybody who starts at YouTube, but again, they'll like start at LinkedIn, or they'll start at your job application that you sent them, and then they'll go look at your other stuff. And so I would say if you have, I mean, if I'm looking at engineers and they've got a bunch of tutorials, or artists or whatever, and they've got a bunch of tutorials teaching stuff on YouTube, like to me, that's a sign that they are probably a little more knowledgeable than average, knowledgeable enough to teach it. They're motivated. They are trying to like give back to the community, which like maybe shows some kind of leadership skills, So I think that's a good thing. So that's something I would link to from your LinkedIn, and put it on your resume, So you can go and find it. Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying about like looking through emails and stuff, how do you make, like, let's say you're either emailing them for the first time or getting back to them, how do you make your email out of those thousands of emails that they get or whatever, how do you make it stand out, like titles or content, or how do you make it pop?
Yeah, how do you make your email stand out from everybody else that might be emailing them? It's pretty hard because email's not real flashy, and if you make it at all flashy, it just looks like it's like spam. It looks like a marketing email. I think that good rules of thumb would be around short and sweet. I think short and sweet's good. I've seen a lot of communications from people, especially new in the industry, that they actually kind of just tell their story. Because they're like, if I just write this epic email that totally talks about where I've come from, where I've gone to, and what I'm so into, and like what I've done, they'll read it and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I have to hire this person. But I think a lot of times what happens is there's like wall of text, TLDR, So I would say, writing, if you're kind of talking about a cover letter almost, there's like a whole art to that. I've got some information on my website, and there's also, if you Google, there's a lot of advice out there, some of it contradictory. And again, it's just because some hiring managers prefer one thing and some prefer another, so that's why you see that contradicting. But I would say err on the side of quickly and clearly communicating why you think you're a fit for that company. So like a paragraph, and a couple links, Do you have a question?
On that same note, does that mean that a cover letter as your email would not be a good idea? Or would you rather include that as like an attachment?
Yeah, it kind of depends. Most companies now have at least some kind of web-based application system. And so sometimes they'll let you like type your cover letter or paste it into a text field. Sometimes it's like upload a PDF of your resume, now upload a PDF of your cover letter. So it depends a little bit. If you think in terms of making it as easy as possible for the hiring manager, it's easier to like open an email and then read the email than it is to open the email, see that there's 2 or 3 attachments, figure out the ones entitled cover letter, open it in a PDF reader, and then read it. That's a lot more steps. So you could do both, because there's also a thing where, if they get an email that's got some attachments, they may be forwarding it off to other people, right? Like your contact at the studio might be a recruiter, and the recruiter maybe looks through your stuff and is like, yeah, okay, this seems to be what the hiring manager is looking for, and then forwards you along to a hiring manager. So if you wanted to cover both bases, you could like write your cover letter in the email, and then also have a couple of docs, PDFs that are attachments that are your cover letter and your resume.
Okay.
Question back there?
So, this is going to be a question. How much does your personal life affect your chances of getting hired or not? Like, my personal life, I'm just like, there's a phrase, no one's right online, but
Right.
yeah, do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. So the question is like, do you hiring managers like search Twitter and Tumblr and Facebook and stuff and what?
And deeper.
Yeah, and deeper, right? That's a good question. I think that it's going to vary, but if you have things online, you have to manage your perception all the time, like whether it's in person or on the phone or like online, you have to manage that presence. And so I would say that if you have something online that you're like, I was like 15 and stupid and this is embarrassing, and you think it could hurt your chances, like I would scrub that off of there personally, It's not going to be, it's not like a clear-cut answer. It's not like, I know hiring managers that like never look at that stuff. I know that in other jobs, like we have policies around that in Amazon, right? But I know at other jobs I have like looked around on social media mostly just to get a feel for like, is this person a jerk? You know, like if they're a jerk on Twitter, then maybe they'll be a jerk when they come into the office, which isn't even necessarily true, right? You might be a jerk on Twitter, and you're totally fine and nice in person and in the office, and so it's just a heuristic, and it goes back to that thing where hiring managers are just like, it's nerve-wracking, like trying to make a hiring decision sometimes, you know, and you want to get it right, and you want to grab as much data as you can to help you make sure you're making that right decision.
And adding on to that, it's like personality is one thing, but like interest is another. So say like I've done some modeling, and they find that it's like, hey, will that hurt my chances?
Yeah, I can't say specifically. I don't think it's an absolute no. I don't think it's an absolute yes. I think it's going to depend. You know, some companies and some individual hiring managers and companies are like more conservative than others, let's say. You know, so I would say do what you can to manage your perceptions the way you want to manage them, right? I mean, if somebody's done like some modeling and they like maybe you don't want to work at a place that wouldn't hire you if you've done some modeling, right? So you have that choice to make too, you know, and so manage that perception. And if that perception is like part of you, and you're like, this is cool with me, this is how I am, and if a hiring manager doesn't want to hire you because of that, then like maybe you don't want to work there. So, yeah.
I think we might have already touched on this, but on the opposite end of that spectrum, where you only have social media as a way to keep in touch with close friends, you only talk in direct message, and you really don't post anything online ever. Would that really be such a bad thing?
No. So the question is, if you don't have a social media presence, is that a problem?
Or a very minuscule.
Or a very minuscule one? Yeah, I don't think so. Because it's just like, that data is not there. So you have to look at other data. Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, some people aren't. Some people don't talk that much on social media, and a lot of people do, and they just like crank up their privacy settings. So yeah, that's not a deal breaker at all.
Okay, so right in the middle of that, what if you had a huge social presence about like 5 years ago, tons of stuff,
Yeah.
and just shut down completely? Do they take are they just like, oh, that guy's definitely what he was 5 years ago?
It's a good question. It's going to depend on the hiring manager. I think that I know I've done that before. I've like seen stuff and I was like, but that was like, they're in high school now. They're not in high school anymore, so it's fine. I mean, maybe some people would, take that into consideration. I think it's really questionable whether hiring managers even should be looking at that stuff, but I know what happens. I'm just trying to be real with you guys. So, yeah. And it falls into that same rule of thumb, manage your image, and make sure that it's what you want and what you're comfortable with.
Amy calls it digital hygiene.
Digital hygiene, yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. Yeah?
What would you define as a bad social media presence?
What would I define as a bad social media presence? I'm not going to list a bunch of stuff, It's subjective. It's subjective, right? I think, in the spirit of the digital hygiene, I would say that if you take a look at it, do an evaluation, go into private mode in Chrome or whatever, and Google your name and see what comes up. And if you see something where you're think about it from a hiring manager perspective, or if you want to be super conservative, maybe your parents, right? Okay, if my parents did this search, how would they feel about it? And then make that decision. So yeah. It's not a clear answer, you guys. You have to, if there's something that you're like, ooh, I'm not sure I want my potential employers to see this, then consider hiding it. Yeah.
I have a question about programming portfolios and Git repositories. So let's say I was going to apply to Blizzard or something, and they probably don't need to see my intro to C++. Do I make a repository just for Blizzard? How does that?
Oh, sure. So the question is, if you've got a ton of stuff online, some of which is Hello World, does Blizzard really need to see Hello World? If it's an awesome Hello World, I mean, maybe. I think that I don't know how much work you have to do to really hide all that stuff. I would just say make sure that you're pointing them to the important stuff. So in your your resume maybe, or maybe your personal blog or your personal like web page or whatever, just say like, here are my 5 projects that I'm the most proud of, and then just link directly to those so they can find them easily. Don't make them dig. Don't make them dig through all your stuff if there's a bunch of stuff.
So I've kind of heard from various people, because it's split on some things, but I've heard from some people it's kind of bad practice to apply for different positions. Like, oh, I want to be a junior programmer here or whatever, and then you also apply for like junior game designer, and then like the hiring manager gets like your name twice for 2 different roles. Obviously it's a case by case thing, but what would you do, or like what are some principles of like applying for different roles or positions?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's if you think you could be a fit for a couple different roles, but they're quite different, like a game designer and a programmer job, is it bad practice to apply to both of those at the same company? I think in general, like, and just to be clear, you guys, this is my perspective. This is my advice. You can ask somebody else, and they'll give you somewhat different answers. I'm certainly not speaking on behalf of Amazon at all. I think if the jobs are quite different, then I think you're going to make the hiring manager go like, well, what does this person really want to do? Like, do they want to do game design or do they want to do programming? So I think that the way I would approach that is I would figure out what you really want to do and then apply for that thing and see how it goes. And then if you get rejected or if you don't get hired or whatever, for whatever reason, then like maybe try something else. Yeah. I've certainly received, a number of like, this person interviewed for this person applied for QA, tools engineering, and game design. Like, maybe a jack of all trades, master of none, maybe. Really wants to work here, which is great. Maybe, it's hard to say, but yeah, I would like double down on the thing that you want the most and that you think you'll be the best fit for.
We have 1, maybe 2 more questions.
Oh, okay, over here. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you're right out of school, what kind of jobs can you land, and what's the competition like? Well, entry-level jobs is the short answer, right? So they're going to have qualifiers in the title like junior or associate sometimes, not always. But look at when you're searching for job listings for companies, just look it over and see if you seem like you're a fit. Like if it says requires 10 plus years of environment art experience, you can't apply for, you shouldn't apply for that, right? Now, with the caveat to that is that oftentimes hiring managers get a little carried away, and they put things into the requirements that probably are more like nice to haves. They probably should be in like the wishful thinking section of the requirements. And so, the rule of thumb is if you fit about like let's say 80% of what they're asking for, go ahead and apply, because it might work out. So if you're on the fence, if you're like, this seems like if it seems like I could do this job, but like I've got some requirements that don't really fit, let's go ahead and apply. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, so how hard is it since your resume is kind of blank? Crafting your resume is like a whole another like topic that we could spend a long time talking about, and you guys probably will, I'm sure, at some point if you haven't already. A lot of what you get out of school is learning the skills, but you're also building up that body of like evidence and proof, right? So you do have that. Like you're not. I know that like a lot of times when you're first out of school, you feel like, oh, now I'm starting at ground zero with my career. Damn. But what you're not starting at ground zero with your career. You've been in a game development or a visual effects career, whatever it is, for at least a few years by the time you graduate, and maybe before that. Like you guys may have been doing art or engineering like in high school, and if you're going into game development, you've probably been playing games since you were like 3 on your dad's lap or whatever, right? So that's all getting rolled in. So don't underestimate that. Like, don't feel like I'm at a school, now I'm starting at ground zero. Like, you have all that stuff that you've built up. You have the portfolio, you have the experience, you have the connections. Like, we didn't really get into networking and why that's important. The short answer is because that's additional proof. You know, when there's like, can this person do the job? Networking is kind of some proof because maybe they know somebody who knows you and can vouch for you, right? But this group of people right here, this is the beginning of your network. You know, so initially, some of you are going to get a job like pretty fast, and now there you're in that company, right? So like this is the beginning of your network. So like you're gonna already have a bunch of skills. You're gonna have a bunch of evidence that shows that you can do those skills in your portfolio and your game projects, and you're gonna have the beginnings of your professional network to vouch for you. So like you're starting off pretty well, actually. Yeah. So this is how it works. This is how the world works, right? You go to school, you go and you get a job. Like, maybe it takes a while to get a job. You're going to get a job.
That's a good note to end on. I think everyone's right at 2 o'clock. So let's give Jason Bay a big hand.